What a difference a day makes, or a few months. Did you know that there are now approximately 98,000 licensed realtors in Ontario? And over 70,000 of us are working here in the GTA. 42% have been licensed for 10 years or more, so that takes us back to 2013, while 35% have been licensed for 4 years or less, just before the pandemic in 2020. I wanted to take this opportunity to repost my very first episode from June 1st of this year, just to illustrate that having experience and thriving in the real estate business for more than 40 years provides perspective. Perspective and experience that are vital when trying to buy or sell a home in the current real estate environment. Are you ready? One, two, three. Is it time to hop into the housing market? Are you a buyer or a seller? Hey, I'm Mike Brown, and I'm with RE/MAX here in Toronto. And I'm going to try and answer those questions. I've been getting more calls than ever from clients asking me, are prices going up or down? Well, it's pretty hard to tell. So the purpose of this channel is to update people on what's actually affecting buyers and sellers on a week-by-week basis here in the city, and more importantly, provide you with some inventory numbers. Yep, every market is predicated on supply and demand. We all know there's plenty of demand and not enough supply. So having an idea of what those numbers look like will be helpful for anybody who's considering getting into the market, be you a buyer or a seller. In the weeks to come, well, every 2 weeks, I'll be providing inventory numbers for the following regions. Toronto being the 416 area code, Durham, Halton, Peel, and York region. Oh, looks like someone's getting dried off in the background there. I've been a realtor in Toronto long enough to remember when you could purchase a house in our city for less than $100,000. Those days are long behind us. So what's really affecting house prices and the rapid incline in that price point here in our city? For the purpose of today's episode, I'm going to touch on what I think are the 4 I's affecting house prices in our city. Not as in these eyes, but as in the letter I. And the first point, or the first I that I want to talk about, is interest rates. Well, we all know that rates have risen dramatically over the past year or so, and the net effect is as follows. If you were borrowing $100,000 prior to the rate jump, when you could take advantage of a low variable rate, perhaps as low as 1.2%, that $100,000 would be costing you somewhere in the order of about $340 a month. And the vast majority, or perhaps 60% of that payment, if not more, would be going toward retiring the principal sum of the mortgage. Well, now that very same $100,000, if you were to borrow it today, would probably cost you somewhere in the order of 4.5%. And that payment would now jump to over $560 a month. But more importantly, and somewhat understated, is the fact that the vast majority of the payment is now going right back to the bank as far as interest, and a smaller portion is retiring the principal, if you have any principal retirement at all. So it's kind of been a true reversal of fortune as far as taking out a mortgage goes. A bit of a double whammy to homeowners. The second I, well, second I would be inventory. We're all hearing there's just not enough of it, and demand is high. And as mentioned before, every market is affected by supply and demand. So let's get some perspective on what that inventory looks like right now. During the process of filming this video and all the edits that are required for somebody who's just starting a YouTube channel, coincidentally, we just broke through the 1,900 mark for available homes for sale on Toronto's MLS in the 416 area code. Now that number was as low as 1,200 in January and February of this year, and coincidentally or not, this is when most people would say real estate prices bottomed out. Buyers had had almost a whole year to get accustomed to the increased cost of borrowing, and they now found themselves with even fewer houses to choose from, which is not at all uncommon for a winter market. Additionally, potential home sellers couldn't get past the fact that their house was worth less than it had been the year before. So these two factors kind of combine to create an undersupplied market. Now, for any shift to a more balanced market to take place, I think we're going to need to see that inventory stabilize at around 2,500 homes for sale in the 416 area code. And again, as mentioned earlier in this episode, check back to this channel every 2 weeks to get updates on the numbers for houses available for sale for the 416 being Toronto, Peel, York, Durham, and Halton region. And for the third eye, investors. Well, despite what recent government polling has been telling us, I believe investors are having a tremendous effect on the housing market and prices. Years ago, most residential investors sought purpose-built apartment properties, duplexes, triplexes, to invest in. But as real estate prices have increased so dramatically over the past couple of decades, single-family houses have now become an ideal investment vehicle for some people. A story came out recently that said that 25% of Canadians are considering purchasing an investment property in the next 4 to 5 years. So it's really no surprise to me that this is also draining the availability of houses for people who need them to call homes. Investors are generally long-term owners, and they will leverage one property once it's increased in value to try and acquire a second property, which leads to more buying and less selling, and this is definitely affecting the market. But again, if we think about that reversal of fortune on the mortgage payment, it's not hard to understand why there was so much heat on the market from investors when you could purchase a house and finance it for less than 1.5%. But now, far less of that payment is retiring principal, and these investors are in a marketplace where perhaps the trajectory of price increase isn't what it was before. How long before they start to question the viability of a single-family house as a solid investment vehicle? Oh, the final eye. Interest. No, not interest rates, but just genuine interest in real estate, the housing market. You know, whether you're in this business as a side hustle, a renovator, investor, home handyman, mortgage broker, or even thinking of becoming a real estate agent, there's just so many more people who are thinking about real estate these days, and that is definitely having an effect on the market. Perhaps the increased amount of attention is really pumping up the FOMO effect when the market starts to gain traction in one direction or another. When I started in this business, the Toronto Real Estate Board had approximately 10,000 licensed realtors. Today, that number has soared to almost 65,000, and the number doubled alone in the last 10 years. I read an article recently that indicated that 1 out of every 58 people joining the workforce here in our city were becoming a real estate agent. Well, that's a lot of opinions about what's happening with the market. No doubt about that. Now, let's get to those inventory numbers.
So, what lies ahead for the wintry road of real estate? It's interesting to look back at the numbers from May and to see how it's affected the market. Which way will the prevailing winds blow? Only time will tell. Well, here's the inventory story from October 19th to November 1st. And until the next episode, this is Mike Brown with RE/MAX, uncovering the real state of real estate here in the GTA and southwestern Ontario. Just wanted to make a quick note on this episode's inventory numbers. If you look closely, you can see there's a new field which is indicated as SC percentage, and that means sold conditional. When I started the channel back in June and the market still very much favored the seller, the number of conditional sales were minuscule and not really worth recording. However, as the inventory has risen, we're seeing more and more conditional sales, so I thought it would be beneficial to indicate how much of the available daily inventory is a pending conditional sale. Additionally, you can see it looks like we're hitting a bit of a peak as far as the rise in inventory as the numbers have started to slow as we've gotten toward the end of October. A very interesting note, though, the available rentals seems to be increasing, and that's something that we're going to be paying more and more attention to in future episodes.